Hey everybody, welcome back to World History. We're doing section 2 today. Your bell ringer today is which thinker's ideas interest you the most and why? So look at your notes from last time. We're going to do notes and a quiz, and then it's kind of just a work day today to work on your review guide or your thinker's project. Our objectives today are to identify changes made to art, literature, and music during the Enlightenment, and to identify the enlightened despots. So go ahead and get your notes out, and let's get started. So, ideas of the Enlightenment are going to spread quickly through many levels of society. Most, those in the higher ups, like the government and the church, felt they had a sacred duty to defend the old order. So they wage a war of censorship, basically restricting access to ideas and information. They're going to ban and burn books and imprison writers. And people would then gather in salons to exchange ideas. Many writers hid their ideas in works of fiction. Voltaire's Candide exposed corruption and hypocrisy of European society, again, behind fiction, because they couldn't go after you for writing fiction. No, no, no. Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels are going to satirize 18th century England, and Montesquieu's Persian Letters are going to mock French society. But again, it's all fiction. Art and literature are also going to reflect new ideas. I can't move my bubble. So, the arts are going to evolve to meet the changing times and changing tastes. So, one of the big things that's going to happen is a study of Baroque versus Rococo. This is basically going to be a very big thing in art. Baroque art was huge in the court of Louis XIV and were huge, colorful works of art that glorified historical battles and the saints. Um, Rococo art moved away from religion and was lighter, more elegant, more charming. It's also during this period we have a new style of music emerge, classical music as we know it today. Bach is going to create religious works for organs and choirs, write for King George I, and write 30 operas. Haydn, who we're going to watch a video on in a minute, developed the string quartet and symphony, and Mozart, probably the most famous one, created operas, symphonies, and religious music that defined a new style of composition. So here's a good comparison of Baroque versus Rococo art. In terms of literature, creation of novels or long works of prose fiction expanded during the Enlightenment. A great example is Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. And middle class readers are going to like stories about their own times in straightforward language that they can understand. Now, this is not to say the Enlightenment didn't just impact everyday people. It was also really big in the courts and like the higher ups of society. They became enlivened by the philosophes. Some monarchs are going to accept Enlightenment ideas, and they're known as the enlightened despots. They're going to use their power to bring about political and social change, but they kept absolute power for themselves. There were three major ones that we're going to talk about: Frederick the Great, Catherine the Great, and Joseph II. So, starting with Frederick, he's the king of Prussia. He saw himself as the first servant of the state, and a lot of reforms that he enacted were to reduce the use of torture and allow a free press. Reforms were directed on making the Prussian government more efficient, but Frederick still desired a strong monarchy and took more power for himself while he was making these reforms. Kind of defeats the point of reforms if you take more power, right? Catherine the Great of Russia. She was a huge fan of the Enlightenment, like fangirl for like Voltaire and Diderot. She exchanged letters with them, which is basically the closest thing to like texting in this era. Reforms. She also was going to abolish torture and establish religious tolerance. She granted nobles a charter of rights and criticized the institution of serfdom, basically slavery. But she also wants to keep power for herself. And as a result, this is going to lead to an expanded Russian empire that's huge. It is the biggest that Russia will ever get. And finally, we have Joseph II. He's the Emperor of Austria. He was an eager student of the Enlightenment and even went so far as to, I guess you could say, slum it, I guess you could say, and dressed up as a commoner and traveled among the people to learn more about their specific problems. In terms of reforms, he worked to modernize Austria. He supported religious toleration for Protestants and Jews, ended censorship, sold church lands, and abolished serfdom. Out of the three enlightened despots, Joseph II does the most. Uh, Unfortunately, his children don't agree with these reforms, so many of his changes were reversed when he died, which kind of sucks because like he was really, really in the ideas of the Enlightenment, like, was very much for these changes. It's important to understand, though, that the lives of most Europeans were completely untouched by the Enlightenment. Many remained peasants living in small rural villages, untouched by courtly or middle class culture, and culture is going to change slowly. If you remember that idea of cultural diffusion that we talked about way back at the beginning of the semester, we talked about the general spreading of culture and ideas over time. The Enlightenment aren't going to reach these villages until the late 1700s, and by the 1800s, these ideas, along with war and political upheaval, are going to lead to change. And with that, we're going to see like the French Revolution and a bunch of other revolutions that we're going to talk about. Right, that is it for notes for today. Regular world history, you're going to be working on your encyclopedia project, or actually, I think that might be, excuse me, that is due today. And honors, you guys are working on your thinkers project, which is also due. Excuse me, they'll both be due next time. I'll see y'all next time. Bye, everybody.